when you started talking about, I think it was the clip that we played in the interview with Steve Bannon, where you're explaining the fact that, what really is taking place in Brazil, the powers behind it. And I think even when you were with Joe, on Joe's, you explained the fact that they went to tell him, Bolsonaro, I'll let you tell the story. What is the exchange with how the U.S. was involved with the elections in Brazil?
Well, are you referring to, when you say they went to tell Bolsonaro? You're referring to the CIA director,
Yes.
Lloyd Austin?
Yes.
I actually can pull that up on screen if you go to the slide deck. It'll be slides starting on slide 12. I can walk you through that.
Go for it, Rob, if you can go through that right there.
So this is the U.S. State Department. Yeah, if you
Go
can
to the
full
slideshow.
screen
Just
it,
press view slideshow. There you go.
Mm-hmm. So, and we'll go through this line by line here, but the U.S. State Department called in massive favors and leveraged personal connections to build voting machines for Lula-aligned Brazil officials, and then the CIA warned Bolsonaro not to mess with or cast doubt on all the new U.S. State Department secured voting machines determining his election. And if you go to the next slide, I'll walk through this. So this is from the Financial Times. This piece is basically about, in fact, if you go to the slide after this first, what they say is this was a concerted but unannounced, so this was basically a covert action by the Biden White House, the Biden Pentagon, the Biden CIA, and the Biden State Department to fortify Brazil's election. So if you go back to the other one, the slide before, so the U.S. provided practical help in the election process to obtain components, especially semiconductors, needed to manufacture the new voting machines. The former U.S. ambassador to Brazil, so they are using shadow diplomacy here because they don't want their formal U.S. State Department fingerprints on it. They're going to the former U.S. ambassador in Brazil to leverage his personal connections with Taiwan Semiconductor, and to leverage those connections, inside of the Texas Instruments to distinguish semiconductor needs and give priority. Now, we have a semiconductor shortage here in the U.S. They are diverting semiconductor chips that the U.S. needs and sending them to Brazil, a foreign country, to add voting machines that the democratically elected president of Brazil doesn't want. The U.S. State Department and some senior Brazilian officials also asked Taiwanese authorities to give priority to Brazil's need for semiconductors, which are used in the voting machines. And then if you go to the next slides here, so then I say what's funny is both the 1964 military junta in Brazil and the 2022 judicial junta in Brazil received direct help from the CIA to rise to power. And then if you go to the next one, you'll see CIA chief, this is Reuters, told Bolsonaro government not to mess with Brazil election. This is in May 2022.
64 is cool. Are you talking about the Sam? What is it?
Brother Sam?
Brother Sam?
Yeah. But I want to just kind of close the loop on this, because if you go to the next one, next slide, yeah. So Bill Burns makes a personal voyage. This is months before the election even happens. We are now force-feeding Brazil electronic voting machines the elected president doesn't even want in the country. And so the State Department is doing that. Then we send in our covert action boys, the CIA, to say, don't you cast doubt. Look at the language. Told Brazilian senior officials that President Bolsonaro should stop casting doubt on his country's voting system. It's not even his country's voting system. We sent the semiconductor chips to build that because Brazil didn't want them themselves. So we're putting the machines in there and then telling them, don't question the results of these machines. So go to the next one. So then, this is also some foreign policy. A month after Bill Burns, it was the Pentagon Secretary, Lloyd Austin's turn to go down to Brazil and push the chief of the Brazilian Armed Forces to commit, to actually do a pledge. Go to the next slide. Brazil manifestos seek to rein in Bolsonaro before election. This is before the election, in a July conference with regional defense ministers. So we are personally paying, as U.S. taxpayers, for the head of the Central Intelligence Agency to go down there. We are suffering under a chip shortage, and we are getting that diverted so that electronic voting machines can go down. Then we are paying for the flights of the CIA director to go down and warn them not to cast doubt on the machines that they couldn't build without us and that the president didn't want. So this was, and actually, let me show you something else here as well. While
Mike,
we're on
the question
effort.
here before we go to the next thing, why are they doing this?
Well,
why do they care?
So my focus on this is on the internet censorship side. This is, I love the people of Brazil. I love Brazilian zouk dancing. I've always been around Brazilian people. I don't speak Portuguese, but I didn't seek this out. This was something that was an unavoidable, inescapable reality of the U.S. censorship work that I was focused on. It was a recurring fact since Trump won the election in 2016, and as soon as Bolsonaro started gaining traction in Brazil, that these issues were interlinked, that they wanted to stop Bolsonaro for the same reasons they wanted to stop Donald Trump. I have that much 100%. There are other issues, so I have this big unpublished report that I'm just showing you some things from here tonight, but that'll be published sometime in the next several months. There is the open question. So the technical reason they said they did it is because Bolsonaro is a threat to democracy. And
who's they? The CIA and Biden?
The CIA, Biden, State Department, USAID, the NGO swarm. We have this concept called democracy promotion programs, which is, this idea that if something is categorized as an authoritarian threat or it leads to illiberal democracy without sufficient democratic institutional safeguards, we deputize our democracy promotion programs to basically overturn their governments, to do regime change operations, to institute judicial reforms in the country, to control their prosecutors, their judges, their universities, their unions, their media ecosystems, in order to manage their democracy. And when something gets categorized as a threat to democracy, that's a technical term that unleashes the capabilities of our regime change apparatus. Now, they did that to Trump. They did that to Bolsonaro. But whenever something's deemed a threat to democracy, there's always something else behind it, right? In Trump's case, it was very obvious that Trump's policy about Eurasia was the primary reason that they ran all of the coup-like actions against him, from the multiple impeachments to the 91 felonies, to the special prosecutors probe, the Bob Mueller 2.5-year FBI special prosecutors, to the whirlwind of state-funded media and intelligence 6 ways from Sunday's things against him. There were other things that Trump did that flew in the face of the interests of international corporations and banks and foundations and NGOs. That one was the primary one in my view. In the Bolsonaro story, since my primary focus is on internet censorship, it's very easy for me to tell that story, and I can walk you through that whole thing. But in terms of the why they did it, again, technically, it's all they need to say is threat to democracy, but there are always interests underneath that, and there are many threads. There is a sort of murder mystery, whodunit. There are many financial interests in Brazil. There are many U.S. multinational corporations of interest there. There are international interests around China and the relationship between China and the Biden administration. There's the connection with the unions and many of the union groups, and there's several others. And this is actually why I'm happy to sit in and sort of play second chair to Nicholas, because I have my own questions around the specifics of who financially benefit from any of these things. Because, for example, Lula connected his whole government to China. And he was very open about that. This is the sort of thing that the State Department and the CIA and USAID typically run operations to stop. And yet you had this very strange situation where we ran these operations to install it. Just this Chinese influence in Brazil. And when you look at the Biden family relationship with Chinese stakeholders, you look at the Hunter Biden, $10 million basically windfall from Chinese clients for his consulting company and partnerships with Chinese energy companies. You see this recurring pattern with the Biden administration. I don't have, though, since everything I do is open source, I don't have any confessions from people in the U.S.
Okay, so can I just unpack what I think you're saying, and then tell me if that's kind of what you're saying, and then Nicholas, I'm going to come to you next. So, are you saying hypothetically to the average person, not somebody that's Mike Benz caliber, this is your world, deputy, you're in working with the State Department, you're in the world, internet, you're around it, this is your world that you study. To the average person, you're saying China potentially used Biden as a favor to make sure Bolsonaro doesn't get in the way, because under Lula, they're able to buy and get more resources and things that they want there, and Bolsonaro gets in the way. So, hey, U.S., we'll stay quiet and we won't do anything with you. We'll keep doing business with you, but we need a favor from you. We need to make sure you go out there and do whatever you can for Bolsonaro to stop talking about the voting system and rig it if you can. Make sure he doesn't win so we can put Lula in, because Lula's going to play game with us, play ball with us, with China. We can get in and do whatever we want to do. Is that kind of what you're insinuating?
I don't know that. There are things that keep coming up in my research about it that I find highly disturbing, and I would not be able to get without the subpoena power of Congress. And it is my opinion that at the end of this process, and once the report that I'm working on is published, and all of this is, can be just the whole timeline chronology, network map, funding flows, cast of characters, all of that. It's my belief that that it would be beneficial for the American people to understand, to have an autopsy of the rogue activity of their own government, for any of the oversight bodies that we currently have set up, whether that is the weaponization subcommittee of Jim Jordan, whether that's the House Foreign Affairs or Senate Foreign Affairs committees, whether that is declassifying federal secrets, frankly, from covert actions involved in this. There are any number of subpoena power equipped courts, congressional committees that could probe those questions. Most immediately, what comes up most frequently publicly in this, and what they talk about, is this international exchange of ideas between Trumpism and Bolsonaroism. And that's a very simple one to understand, right? Which is just the raw political calculus of, you get rid of Bolsonaro, you get rid of Trump, you get rid of and this is a direct quote, the international exchange of ideas. You can actually go to my foundation's website, it's foundationforfreedomonline.com. If you put Brazil into the search at the top, you'll see, oh, yeah, one word, yep. And you just put Brazil on the top, and you'll see a report that I published a little over 2 years ago. U.S. tax dollars funding text message censorship in Brazil. Published this in July 2022, so just in time for the CIA director to descend on Brazil. And you'll see we U.S. taxpayers paid to get the censorship state installed in Brazil. And if
U.S. taxpayers?
Yes, because this is all USAID and NED and the NGOs that are all funded
in Brazil. Private texts to family and friends are fast becoming as targeted by counter disinformation techniques as public-facing posts on social media. This escalation of fact-checkers' interventions and sharing limits on text has been introduced through new speech constraints on popular encrypted apps such as WhatsApp, Telegram, and Rob, can you go a little bit higher so I can read the last sentence? These developments are being funded by millions of dollars in U.S. tax.